Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Getting Low Code Right, sponsored by VeilSun. I'm Laura Walsh, Account Manager at VeilSun, and I'll be your moderator. Before we begin, I have just a few announcements. Because your participation is important to us, we've designed this webinar to be interactive. Poll questions will appear in the pop-up window during the presentation. Please select one of the radio buttons to answer the question and hit submit. We will also be holding a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. However, you can ask a question at any time by clicking on the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen, type your questions, and hit submit. An email will also be sent out after the presentation with a link to the on-demand replay, as well as a copy of the slides. Now let's move on to the presentation, Getting Low Code Right. Presenting today's topic, we have Ty Shoemake, CTO at VeilSun. Ty has more than 20 years of enterprise software development experience, including more than 11 years full-time, hands-on quick-based development experience. More than a decade of business process analysis experience coupled with a deep quick-based design, development, and API skills. He is a quick-based product council member as well as a quick-based certified developer. Welcome, Ty. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks, Laura. Hello to everyone. Welcome to the webinar. We're going to talk about something today that's a little higher level than we did last time. If you were on the last webinar, you know we talked about the new features and functions in QuickBase. We're going to take it up a notch this time, and we're going to talk about getting low code, no code right. A little higher level discussion. So what does this mean? The first thing we've got to talk about is, why do we want to have web applications? What do web apps do differently than what we're used to on our desktop? And everybody is used to, of course, spreadsheets and desktop tools like Excel and Access and all those kinds of things that, quite frankly, a lot of us grew up with. Well, most of us are probably pretty familiar with those limitations. The first being, data is not really live. I can't tell you the number of times in my career when there's been a spreadsheet that I've had and someone else opens the same spreadsheet out of their email and they're different spreadsheets. Version 1 versus version X problem. The second problem is, when data is changed, those changes are not reflected real time across all of those instances of those spreadsheets or the Access database. Another problem, and I've experienced this many, many times, is data is easily overwritten. I make a change to my Excel document, somebody else makes a change and overwrites my change. Security is also a concern. Spreadsheets are very, very easy to email, which means they're very, very easy to email to the wrong place or the wrong person. And also, data is very difficult to share by role. What that means is, a spreadsheet can be seen by anyone. It doesn't matter what your role in the organization is. If you can see the spreadsheet, you can see the data in the spreadsheet. So it's very difficult to share only that data that needs to be shared with a particular person with that particular person. Lastly, it's really difficult in those legacy spreadsheets and desktop tools to connect to legacy and external data. Those connections are pretty easy to see, and those credentials, if you dig into the spreadsheet, are pretty easy to pull out of the spreadsheet, compromising those other systems. So that makes it very, very difficult to connect those spreadsheets to securely share legacy and external data. So of course, web apps to the rescue. Yeah, it's not quite a perfect world. It's a good start, and we'll talk about that here in a second. So what do web apps do differently than what we just talked about, than Excel and Access and those kinds of desktop applications? They do one thing, and they do one thing very, very well, and that's securely expose data to authenticated users. What web apps do that desktop applications don't do is serve up data to multiple people at the same time in multiple departments, in multiple divisions, multiple roles, multiple permissions. And web apps securely do that. They do it most of the time with a very well-evolved security model. They do it using a public cloud, so you can connect to that information from anywhere. Typically, you can use a phone client, you can use a laptop, you can use a tablet, you can use a desktop. You can connect to that information using many, many different types of connections. So web apps do something very well, and that is they expose data to authenticated users. But there are some downsides when we build web applications. This list is, unfortunately, is not exhaustive, but it lists some of the key reasons that you don't have as many web apps as you'd like to have. The first is they're very, very expensive to build. It takes a lot of money to build a web app. It always has. Web apps are a very, very long lead type of project. It's not something that happens in 3 days or a week or 10 days or a month. Web apps are typically very, very complex. They require a lot of different tools. They require a lot of libraries. They require a lot of pieces and components to put those together so that they operate effectively. Many times, too, web apps are difficult to scale. They work well with 10 users. They begin not to work so well with 100. At 1,000 or 200 or 150, whatever that number is, things start to slow down and we start to have problems. They also require high-level skills to create. When building a traditional full-stack application, there's a very, very complex skill set required, multiple skill sets actually, to build, host, and secure a typical full-stack web application. And the last bullet, of course, is it's hard to secure. We know that because we read the headlines about all of these systems that get compromised in organizations from Target to LinkedIn to you name it. It's hard to go a week without seeing something in the paper exposing data that's been breached in some big name organization. So what does that leave us with? Leaves us with something called a capacity gap. Web apps are hard to build. They take a lot of money and a lot of time and a lot of people. So what we end up with is we end up with a web development supply shown in the slide in brown versus a web development demand shown in blue. The demand is always, always, always more than supply. So we end up with an expectation gap. And what that gap represents in most businesses is lost opportunity. When we build a web application, we do it for a reason, and typically that is to optimize a part of our business. When we can't do that for whatever reason, that's a lost opportunity. That may represent growth, it may represent revenue, it may represent efficiency. But whatever it does represent, it creates a gap between what we're able to do, our web development supply, and our web development demand. So what do we do? How do we breach this gap? Well, the traditional way to do that has been to fight for IT time and development budget. What we have in this slide is pretty typical of organizations, at least that I've been in over the last 20 or 25 years, where organizationally within the organization, we have departments that have needs. And those needs almost always outstrip IT capacity. IT only has 2 developers or 3 developers or 5 developers or 12 developers. And we need 6 or 7 or 9 or 15 to get done what we need to get done. So there's never really enough IT capacity to get everybody's web apps built, deployed, and secured. So you can fight for your IT time or budget, or you can transform your organization with low-code, no-code web development. This is something that is being talked about as new. It is sort of the buzzword in 2018. It is the highest growth segment of development and technology that there is right now. It's growing at leaps and bounds. It's almost 50% a year. Low code, no code is. It's been around a long time though. It's been around for a lot longer than people have been calling it low code, no code. For example, VeilSun's been doing this for 12 years. So we've been doing exactly what we've been doing for the last 12 years, which is low-code, no-code web development. What's happening now is the awareness in the marketplace has caught up with the capability that's been delivered by organizations like QuickBase. So the reality, in effect, is changing. The reality of web development is changing. We no longer have to rely on this big full stack development to develop these web applications. We can do it a lot simpler using low code, no code. So why? What's different with low code, no code? Why is web development changing in 2018 because of low code, no code? There's some pretty significant reasons, and it's important to understand those reasons. When I have a lot of conversations with folks, most of the time it's about their success in low code, no code. Sometimes it's about how difficult it is to get low code, no code going in their organization because of it's the way we've been doing things, so it's the way we're going to be doing things, this full stack development. So sometimes it's good to understand a little bit about how to talk about low code, no code, to be able to champion within an organization its adoption. So that's what we're going to do now, is we're going to learn a little bit about how to talk about low code, no code versus traditional web development. This is a really busy slide, but it's a pretty good slide once you can dig down into it and understand it. What it does is it shows you two pyramids. A pyramid on the left that represents low code, no code, and a pyramid on the right that represents traditional, what we call full stack development. Now, what you're seeing here is you're seeing on the right side, in the right pyramid, all of the things that have got to be present to deliver and secure a web application. And these things have always got to be there. They can't sometimes be there. They can't maybe be there. They have to be there every time. And those include hardware, operating system, a development framework like Java or something like that, forms, reporting tools, the code base, an API, a way to manage the secrets, permissions and those kinds of things, and then security at the form level and security at the application level and security at the field level and all those kinds of things. Those are the things that are always there in a web app. Maybe you see them, maybe you don't, but they're always there. That is why it is so difficult and so costly and so time-consuming to develop traditionally a web application, because it has all those pieces parts. And typically there are multiple people involved in building and constructing a traditional web app, because not everybody is a hardware or operating system guru. Not everybody understands Java and forms and reporting tools or APIs. So we've got a very, very complex pyramid on the right. Now, if you shift over and look at the pyramid on the left, what you'll see here is the new paradigm of low-code, no-code development. And what this represents is what I call a 90% built-in. 90% of what you see on the right side in full-stack development is built in and almost invisible within a low-code, no-code web development platform or an application platform as a service like QuickBase. All we have to worry about in the left pyramid is that little bit on top called code. And you can see the difference between what you've got to worry about on the left side versus what you've got to worry about on the right side. Now, what does this mean? What does this mean on the ground? What does this mean in real terms? When you're a business person, you've got a great idea for a web application that's going to optimize a process or help you go after a marketplace or interact with your customers. What does it mean to you? Let me show you what we found that it means. Low code, no code is enabling us and enabling our clients to deliver apps in about 1/10 the time, at about 1/10 the cost, and web apps that are a lot more aligned with the business. What does that mean, aligned with the business? Typically, low-code, no-code applications are built by people or built with the assistance of people who are very, very close to the business process. So we end up with applications that are more accurately reflect the business process. And I'll show you why that is here in just a minute. But right now, that's our thesis right here: 1/10 the time, 1/10 the cost, and more aligned. Coke and Pepsi, the flavors of low code, no code. This is something that you have to understand, is something that you've got to get right. There are two basic flavors of low code right now: low code, no code. The first on the left-hand side is what we call code generators. Basically, these are online systems that allow you to drag and drop and build screens and build logic and all that kind of thing in a graphical user interface. And then they take that and they turn that into code that gets loaded onto your server, and it runs just like anything that's been developed in a full stack environment. What that does is that lowers the amount of time and effort it takes to build that particular code, but you still have everything else to manage on that server that we saw on that slide previously. All those other pieces that lead up to the little stripe in the middle that said code. An application platform as a service, on the other hand, is somewhere that you build and run everything in the same platform, like QuickBase. There's no code, there's no server. Everything is one piece, and there's no dividing line between code and server. It's all the same. So what are the advantages of that? Well, there are some significant advantages to that. Again, 90% of components are built in an application platform as a service. Many times, applications are completely no code. People can go in and build an application and write absolutely no code and have a 100% functional, really jam up application without having somebody go in and write any code at all. Our forms are built in, our database is built in, our reports are built in, there's a built-in API, our security and our roles are built in, and you can instantly build, distribute, and use your application platform as a service app. It's very easy to do. So what's an example of that? What does that look like? Application platforms as a service, there are a number of those out there. QuickBase is probably the best known and probably the most business ready platform, at least it is in my opinion. So what you'll typically see is you'll see a business name .quickbase.com. That in our case it's VeilSun.quickbase.com. That's how users get to the platform. The platform typically costs a number of dollars per user per month. That's how it's charged. And on day one, when you go into the platform, when you subscribe, you have what we call a blank canvas. There are no applications typically. There may be an application library like there is with QuickBase, where you can drag an application onto your platform and customize it and use something that's been pre-built. You can usually have many applications within your platform for one price. Typically, the price doesn't go up the more applications you add, unless you add many applications. So it's an opportunity to have a basic platform that then grows to support many different business processes for the same dollars. Of course, there's no hardware and there's no software because it's browser-based. Application platforms as a service are a boon to business. What they allow us to do is they allow us to squeeze out all of the complexity of developing web applications and deploying web applications and securing web applications and maintaining web applications, and just keep the goodies that make the business so much more efficient and optimize business processes. But there's another big advantage to low code, no code. And I call this slide the low code to the rescue slide. That's not an obvious advantage, but it's a very important advantage. And that is the natural developer advantage. No matter how you slice it, you're only going to have so many people in IT, or if you don't have IT, you're only going to have access to so many dollars to buy IT services to be able to build your web applications. In a low-code, no-code environment, we tend to culture people called natural developers. These natural developers are people who are close to the business process that become developers in our application process, our platform. So they're able to build their own applications. They're able to build applications for other folks. They're able to maintain their applications. They're able to connect applications together. So the people you see on the right-hand side of the screen who far outnumber IT can obviously get more done than just the people in IT can. So what about these natural developers? Everybody knows these people in a business. They're the people with the departmental knowledge, high curiosity, early adopters. Typically, they're Excel gurus. They're the people who build all these crazy web spreadsheets that we see, and we build to run our business and to create reports and to do business analysis and all that kind of thing. They're also very, very detail oriented. These are the best folks in an organization to raise and to groom as natural developers. So when you do that, what happens? Let's go back to our first slide. This is the way it is now, where IT is covered up by operational requirements and sales requirements and HR requirements and marketing needs. This is what it looks like when we start bringing in a natural developer process into the organization. When low code, no code initially comes into an organization, this is sort of what it looks like. You've got IT who may or may not be engaged. They may not even exist. And you have professional services, which is something, an organization like VeilSun. And what we do is we deploy the complex applications and integrations and the less complex apps as well in the beginning. This is what it looks like on day one. Now, if we're successful and we start engaging people, we start grooming those natural developers, what happens next is something like this. You can see the less complex apps started moving away from professional services toward natural developers. And the natural developers are doing more of that work, and professional services folks are doing less. The complex apps and integrations moved up a bit out of professional services into IT, indicating that IT is becoming engaged and doing more of the complex integrations and maybe even some complex programming as well. Carrying the metaphor forward, if we continue on, what we'll end up with at some point is something that looks like this. Our natural developers are doing the bulk or almost all of the less complex applications, and there are more of those because that circle's gotten bigger. They're also doing some of the complex applications and integrations themselves, as well as IT and professional services. What this means is you've got a whole lot more people at the table, at the development table, and your capacity just is so much higher than it is if you're just relying on IT. I started in IT in 1989, and the constant that I've dealt with throughout my career is a shortage of IT bandwidth in every company that I've been in, every organization, to include the Army. And the promise of the natural developer is for us to be able to democratize development to the point where you've got a lot more people doing it. Now, that's a great thing, and that can make an organization very, very successful. But you got to be careful how you do this. And that's the next thing we're going to talk about is sort of the how that's involved in making this 3-slide progression happen and happen the right way. So let's talk about that. What is the how here? A lot of people ask, can't we just let it happen? Can't we just let low code, no code happen? Yes, you can. And a lot of companies do this sort of by default. But we need to talk about that a little bit. We see this a lot as a consulting organization. Organizations that have just allowed low code, no code to just sort of happen in an organization. And what we find is sometimes it's not a pretty picture because there are some real gotchas that can happen. And I'm going to talk about those here. I'm going to show you what we've seen over the last 12 years and maybe give you some pointers on how you can avoid some of those pitfalls. So what are they? What happens when you get low code transformation wrong? Well, everybody wants to paint this. Everybody that sets out to build an application says, I'm going to build this application and boy, it's going to look like this. It's going to be a creative masterpiece. Sometimes, however, we end up with something like this. It is creative, but it's an unexpected result. Sometimes it's not as obvious as the difference between these two images. Sometimes it's hard to see. But over time, these problems, this approach can create problems that are going to manifest themselves. We call it unexpected results. And those can derail a low-code effort. We've seen it happen. I've personally seen this happen. I have seen low-code transformations come to a screeching halt in organizations because there's a part of this they didn't get right. And it's basically an unmanaged low-code transformation. And I always say it makes about as much sense as letting your 14-year-old neighbor kid work on your brakes. Still, some folks say, we'll just see what happens. Here's what they end up with, folks. The first problem we see is unsecure web apps. An application that is built by someone who builds an application their first time can be a super application. It can work well, it can be high performing, it can be secure. On the other hand, it doesn't have to be all of those things. And we've seen a number of cases lately where we've been called in to try to re-secure a web application that has become less secure over time. Let me tell you why that happens. Many times applications start out doing one thing and one thing very well, but then because they can do more, they're asked to do more. And they become, rather than an asset tracker, now they're a scheduler and an asset tracker. And now they've gotten really good at that. So now we're going to start doing some resource management and maybe some HR in there too, and maybe some appraisals are in there as well. And what we end up with is an application that began as something very, very small and narrowly defined now becomes an ERP system running an entire enterprise. And the person building it, who built their first application as that asset tracker, now is responsible for building an ERP system and maintaining and securing an ERP system that runs an entire enterprise. We've literally seen this happen. It's a testament to the flexibility and the raw power of low code, no code, but it also represents a vulnerability to the business because we've got that same person who has never built an application before, building something now that runs an entire business. And an unsecure application is one that can leak data inside and outside an organization. I have literally seen situations where salary data has been shared with people that shouldn't have seen it because of an unsecure web application or a setting within a web application. It does happen. Just as much or probably even more, we see poorly performing web apps. Apps that run slow or become unreliable. Again, this is something that happens as people experiment. An application that's got 600 records and 45 users and 10 reports can work great. That same application with 150 users and 65,000 records and 175 reports is going to perform substantially different. If you don't know going into it how to build it or how to expertly or optimally architect an application, and you make poor decisions at the beginning, those decisions are not going to show up for a while, typically. They won't show up until we have more people using the application, we have more records in the application, or the application grows to the point where it starts to slow down. We see this a lot as well. So this is another sort of gotcha or pitfall for newly minted application designers and developers, poorly performing web apps. Hard to maintain apps. The software development or systems development lifecycle, the SDLC, was used by IT for 20 or 25 years to define their software development methodology, their step-by-step methodology. That's not so important in low code, no code. But when we skip those steps included in the SDLC, we can end up with applications that are harder to maintain, much more difficult to maintain, especially when we have a situation where the natural builder that initially built the application moved to a different part of the country, or moved to a completely different company, or has a new position, or retired, or left the business, or for some reason is no longer the person that is responsible for maintaining that application, and someone else now has to come in and try to figure out how that application is put together, what makes it work, what makes it run, what you have to do this, what you have to do that. It can make an application very, very difficult to maintain. We see that as well. And finally, we're seeing something here, what we call a feature function gap. Everybody's aware that QuickBase has been publishing new features and new functions just almost on a weekly basis now. All those wonderful new capabilities make the applications we're building today much more powerful than the applications we built a year ago, or 3 years ago, or 5 years ago, or 10 years ago. What that's doing is, though, that's creating a feature function gap between our older apps and our new applications. And our users who are using our older applications are asking, well, why can't this application do what this new application does? It's QuickBase, isn't it? The answer is yes, but we've got to go back to these older applications and retrofit these new features and functions into those, and to take advantage of all that increased power and that increased functionality. And if you don't have a managed transformation, that doesn't happen. So you end up with brand new apps that have got all these bells and whistles, in your older apps, which are usually the more important apps because they were done first in an organization, lacking these new features and functions that should be there to make those applications more reliable, or more feature rich, or more optimal for their function. The bottom line, though, is low code, no code apps should never be unsecure, poor performing, hard to maintain, or behind the curve. And if you've got a program rather than just a low code gold rush in your organization, you can do this. What happens when you don't? Low code, no code loses credibility. The detractors in the organization can point at something and say, that was a problem. Low code, no code doesn't work for us. A lot of times when there are problems, development slows because people sort of put the brakes on and they're now a little bit hesitant to move ahead with some of their projects because they've lost a little faith in our low code, no code capability. The worst thing that can happen is low code, no code security roadblocks form. Whenever we have a security issue, then security folks can quite rightly say that we've got a concern about low code, no code security in the organization, and that will stop everything pretty much dead in its tracks. So how do you avoid an unexpected result? Well, you'll want to plan. One of the things that we try to help people understand is this is still web development. We're still developing web applications. We still have all of the challenges that full stack developers had that they spent the last 25 to 30 years overcoming. And what we've come up with is 6 ways to do that. And they're pretty simple, but if you get them right, they're probably going to make sure that your low-code transformation is successful. And these are the 6 things. First of all, learn low-code. We'll talk about all these in a second. Pick a flavor, govern, train, involve IT, and get help. So what does this look like? Let's dive into this real quick. You got to learn what low-code, no-code is. This is a new conversation for most people. Even a lot of people in IT don't really understand what low-code, no-code is at this point. A lot of people are used to low-code, no-code as it was maybe 5 or 6 years ago, where it lacked a lot of the enterprise-level security features and the enterprise-level reliability that it has now. So for a lot of people, this could be a rediscovery of low-code, no-code. You need to pick a flavor. Not every low-code tool is the best for every application. But typically you can pick one that will work for 90% of what you want to do. And then the outliers, you can choose another tool or integrate or whatever you want to do. But you got to pick a flavor. And most of the time it doesn't really matter what you pick as long as you do it and then you dive in and do the right things, all the right next steps with it. In our case, we always recommend QuickBase because we think QuickBase is the enterprise choice for low-code, no-code. We don't think there's anything even close to it. Neither does Gartner. This is probably one of the more important pieces, though, and we call it building a governance framework. What does governance mean? Governance means all of those actions you take to make sure that applications are secure, they are correctly architected, designed correctly, and maintained. A governance framework in an organization simply says, we're going to be managing how applications are built. If you want to build an application, there's a process you're going to go through, and there are approval steps that are going to be taken to make sure that we know you're doing it and that you pass certain quality criteria as you progress within the deployment of your application. Anybody can build one that wants to, but everybody goes through that process so that we're sure at the end of the build that we have a secure, supportable, well-designed, maintainable application that is a growing company asset as it moves on. Involve IT. Oh, sorry, train everyone. This is probably the most important thing. If people are building applications in your organization, you want them to be trained to do it. Nobody wants somebody working on their car where that person has never been trained to work on a car, and that's the first car they've ever worked on. It's the same way with software. We want to train people to the point where they understand how to build an application correctly. Does it take 6 months? No. Does it take 3 months? No. But there are certain minimum skills that are pretty easy to transfer to folks to make sure that when they build an application, they do the right things. Because every application is built the same way in QuickBase. There's not a whole lot of design options you can take. There are some that are right and there are some that are wrong. People should know what's right and wrong. Very important piece. Involve IT. Excuse me. If you have internal IT, their dog should be in the fight. I can remember very clearly back in 1992 when this new thing called client server blew onto the technical landscape. I was working at the time with a lot of mainframe folks who basically dismissed it as a toy. Client server will never replace the mainframe. It will never replace our System 36. It'll never replace all of our IBM equipment. Well, it has. IT in many organizations feels threatened by low-code, no-code transformations. They should be actually leading the fight for low-code, no-code transformation in their organizations because they have the expertise and they can make sure and ensure that it's done right. They know where the mistakes can be made. It's nothing different. It's really no different than back in 1992. Some organizations embraced client server, some didn't. IT's got a tremendous opportunity right now to take leadership in low-code, no-code, and they should do that. That's something that we should be doing in any organization that has an internal IT, is involving IT if you can. Last thing is get help. There are organizations like VeilSun that have been doing this a long, long time, and they can keep you on the road and create bumpers for your organization to keep folks from making mistakes. We can help you understand how to govern low-code, no-code. We can teach you how to assess security. We can teach you how to assess performance. We can help you understand all of the metrics that need to be involved in success of low-code, no-code in your organization. This is probably, to get the best start the right way, this is probably the most important thing, is get some help from someone when you begin this process. Typically, it's not incredibly expensive, and it can really keep everything from, it can help you keep from making the mistakes that we see made in a lot of organizations. Because by the time they come to us, they're well down the road to having made mistakes in their applications and their governance. And at that point, it takes often a lot more time and expense and focus to unwind that than it would have taken in the beginning to do it right. So, learn about low code, get some help, pick a flavor, build in your governance, train your folks, and involve IT. If you can do these 6 things, typically we see organizations that do these well, very, very, very successful low-code, no-code transformations. If you forget these or you miss one, then we need to, you need our help. So with that said, VeilSun is low-code. We've been doing this for 12 years. We've had almost 400 clients, and we've developed almost 900 applications in the low-code, no-code space. So if you need help, we're always here to help. We're always at the end of the phone, or we're at VeilSun.com. We can help you if you're just starting down your low-code transformation journey, or if you're anywhere along your journey, we can help get you back on the right path. So with that, Laura, do we have any questions?
Great presentation. Thanks, Ty. We are going to move on to our questions. If just as a reminder, to ask a question, you just click on the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen, type in your question, and click submit. Looks like we don't have any at the moment, but we'll give everybody just a few minutes to see if there's anything else they'd like to ask about.
Great. Okay, doesn't look like anything came in.
All right, well then I guess we're all set for our presentation today. As a reminder, you'll be receiving a follow-up email from Ty with links to the on-demand presentation and a copy of the slides. For more information on other tools or resources offered by VeilSun, please visit us at veilsun.com, or you can reach out to Ty directly at tyshoemake@veilsun.com. And thanks again for joining us.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.